So you've got that idea, right? The one that's been sitting in your Notes app, or maybe it's just a scribble on a napkin. But how do you take that spark and actually turn it into a real, living, breathing business? Well, let's dive in, because there's a proven way to get from screen to reality without all the usual guesswork and heartache.
But that's where it often stops, doesn't it? From that first flash of excitement, it is so easy to get stuck. I mean, where do you even begin? Do you need a logo, a business partner? Should you quit your job? And suddenly your brain just explodes, right? Like you've got 50 browser tabs open at once, and you end up doing nothing. It's a super common feeling, but it really doesn't have to be the end of your story.
Now, before we get to the solution, we got to face a pretty sobering reality. The problem is that for most people who try to launch a business the old school way, there's a shockingly high chance of failure. And that chance is captured in this number, 90%. Yep, 9 out of every 10 new companies fail. And listen, it's not because the founders are lazy or because their ideas were secretly terrible. It's because they follow a roadmap that sounds logical but is actually completely backward. They spend months, sometimes years, building something in a bubble, only to launch it and find out nobody actually wanted it.
Well, there absolutely is. It's called the Lean Startup methodology. And trust me, it flips that whole old-school process right on its head. It's all about being fast, being smart, and most importantly, building something that people will actually use and pay for.
So the very first step is basically a full-on brain reset. We have to unlearn what we think it means to start a business. The old way is broken. It's built on the wild assumption that you can perfectly predict the future from your desk. And you know what? That's just a recipe for disaster. Just look at the difference here. The old way, oh man, it's all about writing this giant 50-page business plan, disappearing into a cave for months to build the perfect product, and then you launch it with your fingers crossed, just hoping for the best. The lean way is the complete opposite. You start with a simple test, you get it in front of real people as fast as possible, and then you use their actual feedback to learn and get better. It's about learning, not just launching. Okay, so how do you actually get started with this lean thing? Not with a massive, flawless product. No. You start with something way smaller and way smarter. You start with what's called a minimum viable product, or as you'll hear it called, an MVP. And here's the key thing to get about an MVP. The goal is not to launch a finished product. Not even close. The goal is to launch a learning opportunity. What is the absolute bare bones, simplest version of your idea you can possibly create just to see if anyone is even a little bit interested? The goal isn't profit yet. It's validated learning. I love this quote because it just nails the entire idea. Forget about building a giant, perfect castle that's going to take you years. Just build a simple tent, get it up fast, maybe even this week. Then see who shows up, and more importantly, listen to what they have to say once they're inside. And if you think this is just for tiny little side projects, check this out. These massive companies started with the simplest tents imaginable. Dropbox, they didn't even have a product. They just made a simple 3-minute video explaining what it would do. That video alone got them tens of thousands of signups. Or Zappos, they didn't have a giant warehouse full of shoes. The founder literally just went to local shoe stores, took photos of shoes, and put them online. If someone bought a pair, he'd run back to the store and buy it himself. That is an MVP. All right, so your tent is up, a few people are poking their heads in, now what? This is where the real magic happens. This is the engine of the lean startup. It's a continuous cycle that's going to power all of your growth and every decision you make from here on out. It's called the build, measure, learn loop. And seriously, this is the heartbeat of the entire method. You build a tiny little experiment, a new feature, a different headline. Then you measure how people react to it with real, cold, hard data. Finally, you learn from that data to decide what to build next. It sounds so simple, but you'd be amazed how many people just get stuck on build, 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 and never stop to actually measure or learn anything. Let's see this in action. Take Buffer, the social media tool. They started with just a web page. That was their build. The measure was counting how many people clicked on the pricing plans, which didn't exist yet. The learn was that, wow, people were actually willing to pay. That gave them the green light to go and build the real product. Or look at Airbnb. They kept tweaking their website. That was the build. But bookings weren't really growing. That was the measure. So they tried an experiment, offering free professional photography to hosts. And boom, bookings shot up. They learned that the real problem wasn't their website. It was trust, and great photos built that trust. But what happens when the loop gives you bad news? What if the data tells you that your core idea just isn't working? Well, that's not failure. No way. That is an opportunity for a pivot. A smart, intelligent change of direction. And let's be super clear.
A pivot is not quitting. It's not throwing everything away and starting from zero. It's a strategic, calculated shift based on everything you've just learned. You kind of keep one foot planted in what you know, and you move the other foot to test a new big idea.
You want the most famous pivot story ever? It's probably Twitter. I mean, they didn't start out as Twitter at all. They were a podcasting company called Audio. But then, Apple launched podcasts inside of iTunes, and that basically killed Audio's business overnight. So the team took a hard look at what they had and decided to pivot to a little side project they'd been tinkering with for sharing short status updates. That pivot became Twitter, a billion-dollar left turn, all thanks to a smart pivot.
And this is the mindset that lets you make a move like that. You have to fall in love with the problem, not your solution. Your first idea? It's just one possible solution. But if you're obsessed with solving a real problem for people, you'll be more than willing to change your solution when the evidence tells you it's time to move.
Okay, so you're building, you're learning, maybe you're even getting ready to pivot. But how do you actually know if you're making progress? You have to track the right numbers. And this, right here, is where so many founders get lost, distracted by numbers that feel good but mean absolutely nothing.
So let's talk about vanity metrics versus actionable metrics. Vanity metrics are things like page views, total followers, the number of likes. They look amazing on a chart that goes up and to the right, but they don't tell you if your business is actually healthy. They're just dopamine candy. Actionable metrics, on the other hand, are the numbers that are directly tied to your goals and help you make real, actual decisions.
Here are some of the heavy hitters. Your conversion rate tells you if people are actually doing the thing you want them to do. Your retention rate shows if your product is valuable enough for them to keep coming back, because if not, you have a leaky bucket, not a business. Your cost per acquisition tells you if you can afford to grow, and your churn rate is your alarm bell, warning you if you're losing customers too fast. These numbers tell the true story. And if you're ever confused, just use this simple test. When you look at any number, ask yourself, can I make a clear decision based on this? If your total number of likes goes up, what do? Who knows? But if your conversion rate drops by 20% right after you change your homepage, well, now you know exactly what to do. If the answer is yes, you've got yourself an actionable metric.
All right, let's land this plane. Here is the whole thing in a nutshell. 1. Start with a simple MVP, a tent, not a castle. 2. Run everything you do through the build, measure, learn loop. 3. Be ready and willing to pivot based on what you learn. And 4. Track the actionable metrics that drive real decisions, not the vanity metrics that just make you feel good.
So I want to leave you with one final question. Forget about next year or next month or after I learn to code. Based on everything we just talked about, what is the absolute simplest, smallest tent you can build for your idea this week? Because that is how you really, truly begin.